So if announcements are over, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our guest for today. Zig Jackson is a professor and photographer at the Savannah College of Art and Design in Georgia. He has a long tradition of photographing tribal communities and indigenous communities to show how their way of life, that way of life, has been impacted by, I guess, modern times and modern contrivances. He's joining us today. Also, he's the juror for the America's All Media 2021 exhibition. We are honored to have him with us here today. So without further ado, go ahead, Zig. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. It's an honor to be here. Let me see if I can share my screen here. What did I do? It's an honor to be here. I was born in Minot, North Dakota. I was born at St. Joe's Hospital a few years ago in '57. I grew up in Newtown. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Newtown, North Dakota. So there's one hand anyway. So I grew up there and left real early. I went to school in Newtown, but when I was a little third grader, I was put into a boarding school at the age of, what's a third grader, 8 or 9 or 7. And that was in South Dakota. And the government came and took us off the tribal reservation and put us into government boarding school in Chamberlain, South Dakota. So that was a long ways away for someone young to go away. My brother left when he was in my older brother left, they took him away when he was in the first grade. So, and we grew up that way. Every summer we'd get a chance to come home. So we were products of the governmental religion boarding schools. So they no longer do that good. So I worked in Minot when I was in high school. I worked on the federal building. They needed color. They needed minorities, and they hired us off the reservation, and we lived at the YMCA. And every Friday after I got paid, my father would be there to get my check. So I went on to high school in the Intermountain Indian School in Brigham City, Utah. And that's when I started to find out a lot about the political isms of what was going on with tribal peoples. Because other tribes that went there were having the same problems. And that's what exists in my work today. I get a chance to go to all these tribal areas because these kids were there, and I got a chance to meet every one of them. Tribes from Washington State, the Colville, the Yakima, Idaho, the Blackfeet, and the Shoshone Bannock, and the Nez Perce. Montana, you had Flathead kids and Blackfeet kids, and you had Sioux, Assiniboine kids, and Crow kids going to school at that Intermountain Indian School. The Dakotas, you had all the Lakota tribes and the Mandan, Hidatsa, and the Rickarau tribes going to school there. Nebraska, you had your Macy and your Nebraska tribes. Oklahoma, you had your Creeks, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Seminoles, Cherokees, 5 civilized tribes. You had some Comanche kids going to school. And in New Mexico, you had all your pueblos, the 7 northern and the 7 southern pueblo tribes, the Picarees, the Santo Domingo, Santa Clara, Santa Ana, Taos. And then you had, your southern, you had your Isleta, Laguna, pueblos. And then you had your Diné tribes, your Navajo tribes. And Zig, in California, you had your Mission kids, and you had a few Alaskan, Athabascan kids, some Inuit kids going to school there, not Eskimos, Inuit. And Zig learned all that. I talked to these kids and I learned their stories and learned what I was fascinated by that. In my high school years, I went on to school in Oklahoma. I wanted to become a great football player, and I went to school in Muskogee. I was too slow to play football, but I did play junior college basketball in Muskogee, Bacone Junior College. Then I knew the Creeks, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Seminoles. I knew the Comanche, the Kiowa, the Osages, a lot of native, the Otos, the Pawnee, the Ponca, the Sac and Fox. And I went to school with all these kids and I learned their ways. And that's like Oklahoma is like a second home to me. New Mexico is like a second home to me. Utah, I know Utah by the back of my hand. Every time I go to Utah, I go to the northern Utes, the southern Utes, and I visit people I went to school with. And same way with Oklahoma. I go to Tulsa and the Osage Hills and I look at their art and talk to them. Sometimes I don't even photograph and I talk to them. So I went on to California. I got my degree out of Oklahoma and I went to school with two Sac and Fox ladies, Gail and Grace Thorpe. They were Jim Thorpe's daughters. They were older than I was, but we got along great. And I went to school at the University of New Mexico and started picking up the camera more. And I didn't know UNM was one of the top photo schools. I just went there to just take photography and throw pottery. And when I was going to school in Oklahoma and Tahlequah, from Bacone, I switched to Tahlequah in Northeastern Oklahoma State, and I played football for them. And after practice, I'd go right to the pottery studio and throw pots. In fact, going back a long way, I was in Upward Bound at the University of North Dakota during my high school years. And when I'd go home, and a potter from Minot taught me how to throw pots. So let's look at my work. So let's do that, Zig. You know what? Here's a body of work that I got the Guggenheim with. I received a Guggenheim, and that's one of the greatest achievements you can ever get, a John Simon Guggenheim Fellowship. So I would go around and photograph these tribal peoples I met while I was in high school, and I would go to all these Native American Indian reservations. This is a couple, they're Sac and Fox. And this is Mitch Williamson, who's Choctaw, and his wife is Sac and Fox. He was a POW in the war. And she's taking care of him. And I went to school with their sons. Here she is after Mitch passed, and she's being taken care of. And that is Christine. And she adopted me as one of her own. She said, "You'll always have a place to stay." And growing up on the reservation, my mom was a traditionalist. She taught us the tradition of our Native American culture. And she taught us always to be good and treat people good. So, and those are the, philosophies I live with today. So this is her niece taking care of her. And for the Guggenheim, I started doing Indian homes as I traveled and photographed. And this is Bentrip Bob. He's a Choctaw medicine man, and he blessed me before when I was ready to leave. And I went to the Walmart and bought him baskets of dress goods and dish towels and plates and things he could use in his home. So he's passed away now. So. This is a guy up in North Dakota. His name is Art Smith. And I visited him because I went to school with his son. His son has passed away. He died of diabetes. And here we have Art. A year after I had taken this photograph, they amputated his leg. And you can look in the background, you'll see Dr. Pepper, you'll see Pepsi, you'll see Canada, and all the sugars. but he spoke to me for an hour in his language, and I understood every word he said. And I said, Art, I'm going to take your photograph. And I did. So this is Clarine Dancing Bull. And she's showing me her beadwork, her moccasins, her leggings, and what she has. And those are her prized possessions. And on her wall, she's got her tribal language. Ma Garaga means pray. Ma Huba means holy. And these are words. And I asked her, I said, why did you put those up? She said, because I don't want to forget the language, she said. And she had these up. She didn't want to forget her native language. It's being lost. So this guy's down in Fort Washakie. I met him at the Indian school. He was a janitor. And I'd visit him every year. I'd come by. And he made war bonnets. You can't make war, not anybody can make war bonnets. You had to have that medicine. And these are real traditional eagle feathers. And they'll take care of your home. If you put them up on your door, they'll watch your family. And those are the concepts as a photographer, an artist. When you go into different cultures, you keep your mouth shut and you listen and you accept what they think, and he says they're holy. The Mahubads, they're holy. And you respect that because that's his way of thinking. I took this photograph and I asked him, I was talking about her and her. I said, these are your daughters. And he said, yes. And I said, where's your daughters at now? And he said, one is going to school in New York. I said, really? New York City? And he said, yeah, some art school. I said, really? What's the name of the art school? And he looked around for an envelope and it said Pratt School of Art. I said, she's going to Pratt? Oh my goodness, in Brooklyn. And that's a great school to go to. That's where Robert Mapplethorpe came out of. And, so it was great to hear that. So this is a gal in Crow Agency. I went to school with her father. It shows a lot. It shows a lot about a young woman and a young child becoming a woman at her age. How old do you think she is, Mr. Zig? Probably about maybe 17, 18 years old. I used to tickle her. I'd grab her from the top of the truck and pull her into the cab and just tickle her, and she just would laugh and laugh. And I hadn't seen her in years, and she's got 3 children. So very beautiful photograph. You photograph everything. You don't, if there's a beer can here, you leave it. You want the public to see what's real. It's reality of what's happening. And that's what I want my photographs. And these are the images I submitted. This is her father, Lennis Bulltail. We played football together in high school at Intermountain Indian High School in Brigham City, Utah. And he's got his medicines and his feathers and his ancestors up there. Very proud of them. I was passing through Fort Washakie and I saw this guy on his step. And you sit in your truck or you sit in your car or van, you don't get out until they invite you. And I waited and he's standing there, but his lips are moving. He's praying. Thank you, Creator, for a beautiful day. Thank you for letting me see this day. I'm an honor to be here in this life. And then he looks at me and he waves me in. He talks about, he's taking care of his brother. He talks about the life of survival out there and what they got to eat and the game and the sacredness of killing this elk and taking a piece of that elk and taking it over the hill and praying, you're going to feed my family. And then he's telling me these stories and I just sit there and listen and I'll take a photograph. So, and then driving down the road, this guy ran into his house. I said, how are you doing? And he said, I want to show you some of my art. And these are government boarding, these are government homes given to all tribal members by Richard Nixon. He loved Native Americans. Richard Nixon, President Nixon, had a coach that was Native American and listened to him. And some of these homes, when they first put them up, didn't have the right insulation. So, and this is just the way of life, and you're showing that. This poor little dog was all beat. She was been picked up. She just had babies, and this guy just laid with her and played with her. And it's just the way it is. This guy is Hopi, First Mesa. They just got electricity. They didn't have any running water. And he's telling me about his ancestors and about his culture. And I'm there listening. What are you going to do with your camera? It's a low light situation. It's a digital camera. You're going to up your ISO. There's not enough light in there. You want to show the way they live. And you're going to go ahead and get your light meter. You're going to up your ISO probably to 1600 so he doesn't get as grainy. And then you're going to photograph. And that's what I teach my students. I teach my students about going into areas and having respect. I teach them about culture. I don't care what it is. You can go down to Texas, and then you can go into the cowboy culture. You can go into the Bronx, go into the hood. That's a culture. You go into the Native American culture. It's something Mr. Zig knows. And that's what I teach them. And I always teach them to have respect. I say, when you're out there by yourself and you're taking landscape photography, lay something down, tobacco, piece of sandwich, and tell the creator, thank you for having me here. I honor that. There's a reason why I'm here today. There's a reason why you're all sitting there listening to me, because you're meant to be here. I had one student, and she was an awful student. I hate it here in Savannah. I can't stand it. I should be in New York taking pictures and making my life go. I said, shut up. This is where you're supposed to be at this time in your life. A year later, she was graduating and someone yells at me from across the street. And I waved and she came running, and I was thinking, this is probably one of my students. And she said, Mr. Zig. And I said, yeah. She said, guess where I'm supposed to be at this time in my life? And I said, where? She said, right here talking to you. And I said, I remember you. So they don't have running water. They got to haul it, and they keep it next to the stove so it can have hot water. And these are the Hopi Kachinas. And he's probably had them, or she had them, ever since she was young. And there's wind, there's ice Kachina, there's cold Kachinas. Everything has a spirit. And that's how they're taught. I was driving through the Assiniboine Reservation years ago, and I stopped and I saw this lady in her yard. Again, a prefab home Richard Nixon gave. And she was out and she was watering her plants. And someone stopped and gave her some fry bread. And I sat with her and I said, can I take your photograph? And she said, yes. And her husband came home. Her husband collected he would buy paints for the people out back, the men out back, the winos, the guys who lie in the alley, and they would draw for him. And he would pay them and then collect their art. He's passed away now. She's still living. So, and this is Philomena Grinnell. She's Hidatsa. And then that's her son and daughter. And I just visited with her, and I took a group shot. The type of homes they have out there. Oh, I'm not going to go there. It's too scary. No, it's not scary. You go out there and your work's going to make it. And this is the way it is. Know your depth of field. Everything should be in focus. What aperture are you using? You're using a 22, a 16, or 11. Bring in your highlights a little bit. There's no detail in your shadows. Bring those out. But there's trash all over. There's nothing going on. There's only one. Show that. show us your feeling in your photograph. The roof is torn. The window's broken, so you don't have any money to fix it. They're going to go ahead and put a piece of plywood on it. So here's a Hopi bedroom. This little girl collected all of her Hopi. You take one of these Hopi dolls and you put it in a gallery or a collection, that'll bring you 7 grand. An amazing thing. I was driving way in the middle of nowhere in the middle of New Mexico in the Alamo Indian Reservation. I always thought when I went to school at UNM what this place was like, but I'd never been there. And these guys were out sitting on their lawn outside in the shade. This is a lawn. And when you come by, you can't get out. You just sit in your truck. And then the patriarch gets up and he comes maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes later. He said, can I help you? I said, I came to visit. He said, get off, come and visit. And we spent the day talking about creation stories, and they're Navajo, they're Diné, they're Athabascan. They came across the Iceway in Alaska, and those are his beliefs. Then when he was telling me all of that, he says, he points at his little boy here, and he said he just got his lip fixed. He has a cleft lip. And I said, he's a beautiful little boy. And I took this photograph. This summer, I drove out there way in the middle of nowhere, and I gave it back to them. I waited in a truck, and he came out. And I said, do you remember me? And he said, yes, I do. I've been waiting for my picture. And I said, here you go. And I gave him the picture. I said, COVID is here. I said, did you get the shots? And he said, no. He said, I don't want the shots. I said, I guess I better not get out then. So I didn't get out, but I gave him back the pictures. You always give pictures back. They love their pictures. I was in Albuquerque and I saw this guy on the street, and he's a veteran, and I sat and talked to him. I went and bought $100 worth of food, bologna, salami, cheese, chips, the case of Coke, a case of Dr. Pepper, about 5 gallons of water. I bought, bread and hot dogs. And I pulled up to this area where all the homeless was staying, and they're watching me. I pulled my end gate down in my truck, and I set all the food out, and I said, come and get it. And there's 3 groups of homes. There's this guy's home with all the old people, in the middle with a young punk group and skateboarders, and on this end were the women and the clean group. And when they got together, they started fighting. I said, hey, there's no fighting here. You didn't learn that at your home. You don't fight over food. And in a corner, I could see some little head snake up above a sheet. And I says to this gal, I said, go fix your sister a sandwich. Take her and take your sister a sandwich. And she did. And it was this gal. I went back there. I said, what are you doing here? And she was Papago from Arizona. I said, I used to play basketball at Intermountain Indian School with a Papago. And that opened up the dialogue. She said she came looking for work with her husband, and he left her. He got hooked on heroin, and she's with the little child. So I said, oh my goodness. And I gave her some money and left. So that was the work. This is the work I did with the Guggenheim. So quickly, let me see, what do we do? View maybe, huh? Hide. What do we do here, Greg? I forgot how to do this. I've been on the road so long.
I think you can, let's see. So you're in full screen there.
Hit play.
Go ahead and hit play up at the top. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Would that
on the right below the bar.
Oh, right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is my name, Rising Buffalo. My grandmother gave me that name. I always remember it. Buffalo getting up in the grass. We lived out in the prairie of North Dakota, and my mom was cooking, and she was a full-blooded Mandan Indian. And she said, Grandma's going to give you an Indian name today. And she faced me towards the east and prayed, and faced me towards the south and prayed, and the west and the north. And she said, henceforth, your name is now Buffalo getting up in the grass. And my brothers were looking in the window at us. So first photographs, I set this up where you could see my first photographs. It looks a little out of focus. And these are the areas in which we grew up, entering Fort Berthold Indian Reservation. These are the Badlands coming out of Dickinson, going north. I often loved it. They flooded our lands. They gave us smallpox in the 1830s. They wiped us out. 64 of us lived. Some say 94. Some say even more. Some say even less. Then they put us on the reservation. And then in 1932, they said, we're going to build a dam. Then they moved us again. They said, we're going to move you up here and you'll never have to pay for water again. And you'd never have to pay for ice. You can have ice boxes that keep your food and you won't have to pay for it. But we pay for it. They put us up in the Badlands. Now what do we have? We have oil. Now they want the land back. They want to fight us for it. So my dad, and this is Mr. Zig. I was a young kid. I came from a family of 10. My father was a spree alcoholic. He would always come back, maybe drink maybe once a year, maybe once every six months. But he would always come and he'd say, Ziggy, Ziggy. And my brothers would say, get up, Zig, go take his boots off. He had arthritis in his legs. And I would take his boots off. And he'd say, hit or walk. I said, Dad, it's late. He goes, Nidata. He said, I want you to leave. Get out of here. Of all my kids, I want you to go and get an education. And he put me in after grade school, I was put into every boarding school. I'd be in Oklahoma saying, Dad, can I come home for Thanksgiving? He'd go, no, there's nothing here. You stay down there. And I plugged away and I met people and I got an education. Look how tight my pants are. My goodness, you can almost see my camel's, is it foot or toe? Anybody? Hello?
It's something like that.
I'm laughing, I'm joking. It's okay. He's having a giveaway. We put our teepees up and our tents and my sisters cook, and he has 4 or 5 war bonnets. He's just going to give them away. His brothers come and they sit with him and they help him and support him. And that's called culture. That's called heritage. I was going to school down south and I came home and I said to my mom, I said, I want to take a photograph. I put the camera up on a tripod and she dug into trunks and she pulls out this star quilt and this Hudson Bay and these Pendletons. And then my father died in 82. And inside the trunk were these war bonnets and she made us boys wear them. One of my early photographs. And I'd go around the reservation and photograph as a young kid. She's having a giveaway. She's giving away. And over here, you'll see the other lady giving away, and she's giving away a war bonnet. And the singers in front are given away also, but they're being fed. And that announcer over there is saying, Jim Brown, would you please come on up and receive this gift? And this announcer here is saying, Anne Marie, please come up and accept these gifts from this family. And I'm photographing that. And he came back from the service and they're honoring him and taking this photograph, and all of his sisters are dressed, and they're all gone except two of them now. And I hugged them this summer when I saw them. So I came by and these guys were going towards their teepee. And I said, can I take this picture? Can I have a picture of you guys? And this old man on the left said, Hiridaba. And this guy on the right said, Raymond Dancing Board, the Markishtas go. Ah, two shits. This old man said, who is this? And the guy on the right said, that's Raymond Dancing Board's kid. He's the funny one. Takes pictures. Years ago, I gave this picture back, and a couple of years, maybe 5 years ago, a kid came up to me, maybe in the late 20s. He said, you took a photograph of my grandfather, and we see it every day. It's above the TV. And I knew exactly which photograph it was. So make sure everything is in focus, get back, take a good photograph. And I'd go around and take photographs. Roseanne Crow flies high. This is a gal, she's a meth gal in Crow. And I photographed her. And that thing with clothes on it, that's called a clothesline, if you guys don't know what that is. So I'm joking. Rodeos, I'd go around, photograph rodeos. I was way up there in Havre, Montana one time, and I photographed this. A lady said, can you take a photograph of my daughter? And I said, yes. And I'd walk around and take pictures. Gertrude Foolish Bear. And here she is. And her father was Matt Foolish Bear, and he was of the reservation. And he said some good things to me. He said, Zig, whatever you're doing out there, that's good. You look good, you're happy. He said, stay out there. There's nothing here on a reservation. And he passed away, and his daughter came up to me and said, Zig, a year later, they mourn, and then a year later, they'll have a feast, and she's given her best horse away. So Reno Sparks, Reno Colony, women would come from matrilineal culture. Everything comes from the woman. Our languages, our Indian names, everything comes from the woman. Our stories. You listen to women. You treat your woman bad, you treat your future bad. And these are Paiutes. Indian boy on roller skates. Urban Indians. This guy on the left is a grass dancer from North Dakota. The guy in the middle, Sac and Fox, and the guy on the right is a Comanche. He's a veteran. So, the early works, I used to put my images together. These are Indian foods. These are stored in warehouses in Kansas and Nebraska. These are in case of nuclear attack, when you drive through North Dakota, every 16 miles or every 15 miles, you see a missile base where missiles are stored, and they're fake and some are real. But these are the type of food that are stored in these bunkers. What are you going to do with them? Well, let's give them to the Indians. Every Thursday of the month was commodity day. And these are the commodities we would get. And I was a young photographer, and I wanted to show that. I took a photograph of an old Albert Bierstedt painting of the last remaining buffalo. And then I put my brother and my niece and nephew, and I cut them out with the scissors. And then I photographed these chickens. Sodium eutherobate. I wonder what woman would know what sodium eutherobate is. You know, and I'd write on my photographs, I'd hand color it, I'd stamp them. I'd listen to the stories of Mahabawia. She could change her appearance, and become any type of animal and steal your soul. And she's beautiful. And she could sing. And I did these when I was in the intro class at the University of New Mexico. This is out in New Mexico. She went out there with me. She was a classmate. And I got ready and I told her what I wanted. And then she took her medicine out and her tobacco and she prayed. And she said, this is for all the tribal women. And we photographed. It was a sacred moment. Austin Two Moons, stoic. Austin Two Moons, smiling. Be stoic, smile. We got beautiful smiles. I remember I was in an art show in San Francisco and I thought, great photograph. I can tone it and it'll sell. I can pay my rent. Then I looked at the contact sheet and I saw this. I said, wait a minute, Zig, it's going against all your ways of thinking. And I did that little series, be stoic, smile. Be stoic, smile. You know, it was because of the slow shutter speeds, turn of the century. Edward S. Curtis, A.C. Vrooman would take these photographs of tribal peoples. And the shutter speed was so slow. Please stand still, don't move, don't move, don't move. And you take a photograph and we all look stoic. Then Hollywood gets a hold of it and we have to talk like this. We're native. But we have beautiful smiles and we have beautiful sense of humor. This is my mother on the right with a war bonnet on. My cousin Joyce, she's a lesbian. And she grew up with us kids and she was a beautiful dancer. She took part in all the men's dances. And her breasts are gone. She had cancer. And she passed like 6 months after this. And my Aunt Rose on the left, and she passed. Who's going to carry it on? These young kids, my nieces and my nephews. So early photographs, I used to take over the whole dark room. And then I'd have, you know, they'd save me all these old photographs and I'd re-photograph them. And then I'd put them up and then I'd expose them and put 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 images together. And I started writing. You know, this is at Chamberlain. They took us off the reservation. The guy sitting, that's my grandfather. His name is Dancing Bull. They said, you can't have names like that. You got to have names like Jackson, Stevenson, Lincoln, Washington. So he said, I'll take the name Jackson. And the guy standing, that's Stevenson. The bottom lower right photograph, that's Brother Bonaventure. He taught us how to be Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. Brother Paul above him taught us how to play music. They're trying to break us down. I found this old photograph that says, save it for Zig, he'll take it. And my mom said, they found this photograph, they'd like you to have it. And it was this top photograph. So I was showing that transition of what was happening to tribal people. I was a potter. I made these masks. The one on the left is high fire. The rest of these other two are raku. And I would go into these ruins in the Southwest and I would climb back in there and try to seek a vision. Me and my dog, my German Shepherd, middle of the night. And he'd start to cry and would leave. I put these two together to show that how spiritual this place was. And I put it in a show at UNM. And I was just a little photo kid. And I didn't even have money to go to the opening. I took the old posters out of the frames and I put these in. And I went to class that Monday and the guy was waiting for me and he goes, Zig, your piece is sold. I said, really? Who bought them? I said, where's the money, man? Where's the money? He goes, don't you know who bought them? And I said, who? And he said, the Contemporary Museum of Photography in Chicago. I said, whoa. And then I started getting collected. I started getting more political. I'd go to the galleries in the Southwest and they said, well, we really want toned Indians, toned images of tribal peoples. So I selectively toned my images. You want toned Indians? I'll give you toned Indians. And left the rest black and white. I used a rubber cement, a photo maskoid, and I masked out all the rest and I dipped it in copper and got that. Of course, nobody bought them. I traveled all the reservations. These are Jemez Indians. And Joe, Joe Gutchipin. Yeah, and the last, the one on the right, the three kids, they're in their 30s now. And you could see John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy up there. I photographed groups of people. Ladies, can I have your photograph? And they said, you're not supposed to take our photograph. I said, yes, I can, because you guys are getting old and you're gonna leave us one day. And they'd laugh, and they stood, and I took their photograph. Enemy Women's Society. Peyote. The peyote. This is called the Native American Church. Fox Society. You're not supposed to take our photograph. I said, yeah, but you guys are going to leave one day. And they said, okay, well, you can take our photograph. Even the reenactment of Lewis and Clark. This is an early photograph. You're brought up with the Native American name. Rising buffalo getting up in the grass. And I was walking through this flea market, and I see that notorious end of the trail statue that this guy had did of the tribal guy on a horse, beaten. And then I see the steel fence post, a great metaphor. Let's grid this country up. And I see this beautiful buffalo, and I take a picture, and this guy yells at me, hey, that'd be $5 for that photograph, buddy. And I put my camera down, and I went up to the buffalo, and I patted it. And I said, how beautiful you look. I didn't pay him. I walked away. Indian photographing tours, photographing sacred sites. These are called the Mittens. This is down in Monument Valley. I got out, I parked my VW bus, and there was a carload of Germans there, and they started laughing at me. And I said, what's so funny? And he says, you're an American Indian with a Hasselblad driving a Volkswagen. I said, yeah, that's true. So I dated women because of their cameras. I put my way through photo school. Each body of work you could look at, I could tell you who I was dating at that time. Joan O'Byrne, she was from Newark, New Jersey. She had a Mamiya 645. What a beautiful camera. Then we broke up. Then I dated Jennifer, and she had all the Nikon lenses. She had all the Nikon lenses and the Nikon FM2s. Then we broke up. Then I dated Jody Hasselblad, 500 cm. Indian photographing tours, photographing Indian. Anybody know where this is at? Anybody?
Let's see if we have any guesses. Colorado?
No.
No. Okay.
British Columbia?
British Columbia?
Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Those are the Grand Tetons.
There you go.
This is in Mesa Verde. You guys have cameras. You have respect when you go into cultures. You go into churches. You do what they do. You touch their holy water. These areas are sacred. You keep your mouth shut. And I tell my classes that. Where is this at?
That's
Anybody?
in South Dakota.
Yep. South
That's
Dakota.
in South Dakota.
Yeah. This is Crazy Horse. Never had his photograph taken ever. They took away the Black Hills from the Lakotas. They said, long as the wind blows and the water flows, this land will be yours forever. And then they discovered gold the next year and took it right back. Oh my God, we built Mount Rushmore. We must commemorate them somehow. So back in here, they're building a statue. I can't get my mouse going. And, but that's him in the background. So just driving and photographing. I tell everybody, this is how I make out. Everybody thinks we have to have a sacred name. It's just culture. I tell everybody, this is how I'm built. the exploitation of the Native American man, going around and photographing corn dogs, hot dogs, and cold drinks. I did a series called Indian Photographing Tourists Photographing Indian. Not to be mean, not to be spiteful. I just did it because there was a lot of tourists. Indian Photographing Tourists Photographing Indian. Just walking around with my camera up in Taos, New Mexico. Just because you got a camera, you don't put it in anybody's face. And this image made Zig famous. I was a young kid. All the museums wanted this series. Indian Photographing Tourists Photographing Indian. Take a picture of the Indian. Take a picture with the Indian. This is in Cherokee, North Carolina. I saw this guy standing on the sidewalk and I parked. I said, hey, can I hang out with you? He didn't say anything. He just shrugged his shoulders. And this white lady came by with two young kids. And she said, oh my God, look, there's an Indian chief. Stand by him, I'll take your picture. And this little girl cowardly grabbed her leg and she didn't want to because she was scared of this guy. And she said, no, it's okay. He won't do anything to you. And the little boy went and sat next to the Indian chief. And I couldn't look him in the eye. And he couldn't look me in the eye. And I put my head down and I had this huge lump in my throat. Oh, take a picture of the Indian chief. And after the photograph, he walked away and he walked by himself. And I stood there. I said, I think I'm going to leave. And he said, you pay me. I said, okay. I gave him $20. I said, thank you for having me. He didn't say anything. And I drove into the Great Smoky Mountains right behind here. And I couldn't sleep. I said, well, what happened to our culture? And I woke up like at 3 a.m. I said, Zig, it's okay. Society made us that way. It's okay. Take a picture of the Indian. My camera, your camera, or Chief Red Hawk's camera. Just driving it, photographing. I photographed all the signs from Albuquerque to Flagstaff, Arizona. Just living in my van. You stay in one of these, a rattlesnake will bite you. Visit the world's largest Indian reservation. Indian reservation, all plastic money, okay. Buffalo, bison. Why confuse us? I went hunting for Sitting Bull's grave. And I prayed there. Sikakawea. And I prayed there. I photographed all the Indian reservation signs. This is one of my first ones. This is in Montana. Southern Montana, the Northern Cheyenne, the Crow. I used a plastic Hoga camera on this one. Laguna Indian Reservation. Wallapai, the Pi tribes of Arizona. The Ute, Mountain Utes, tough group. I saw this one in the middle of nowhere. And I took a photograph. The scenery, already rich, pleasing, and beautiful, was still further heightened by the immense herds of buffalo, deer, and elk, which we saw in every direction, feeding on the hills and plains. I do not think I exaggerate when I estimate the number of buffalo, which could be comprehended at one view to the amount of 3,000. Meriwether Lewis. And in the background is the Missouri River. And the cowboy that owns the land put that up. I photograph and put them in diptychs, beat these savages. And that is at the library in San Francisco. Praise these savages. And that is at the Capitol in Salt Lake City. This one is at the VLA, the Very Large Array. And this whole valley hums. Zzz, zzz, zzz. And then I took my clothes off. This culture uses this to pray with, and this culture has nothing to pray with. I did a series called Indian Man in San Francisco. I walked around with my war bonnet. Why do I have to go out there and take photographs of tribal people? Why can't I be my own Native American man? And I'd stand there and people would take photographs of me. It was a performance piece. Indian man on the bus. Indian man in the mission. These are little eternal gangs. They'll beat you if you walk on this street. I stopped a gal and she was going to school and I said, "You look like a student." She said, "Yeah, I go to San Francisco State." I said, "Hey, can you do me a favor and take my photograph?" She goes, "Sure." And I took my war bonnet out and I said, "I'm going to walk across the street." And she goes, "Oh my God, no." And I said, "If they knock me down and kick me, just keep shooting." She goes, "Oh, I can't." I said, "Please do that." She goes, "Okay, okay." But nobody said anything. Geronimo, Indian man on the beach. Then I made my own sign, entering Zig's Indian Reservation. Why do I have to go out there? Why can't I put up my own sign? I got to do something about these tours. I got the Golden Gate Bridge on my reservation. These homeless, they were going to move them and build a ballpark. And I went and sat up with them. And this cop comes out. He looks at my sign. He reads it and he goes, "Is this yours?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "That's pretty damn good. I really like it." He says, "But you got 15 minutes to move it or you're going to jail." So I go to City Hall. I put my reservation sign up and I stand there. I go to Golden Gate Park where William Randolph Hearst has his buffalo. And I stand there and I sit there and more tourists come by. And I'm here in Georgia, got more environmental. Kennecott Copper Mine in northern Utah. I photographed all the Indian veterans. These are Rickarraw. They're all dead now. These are Crow. That's Thomas Yellowtail, the medicine man. This guy got back from Desert Storm. These are Utes. I went around Indian Man in the South. These are the homage to the three that lost their lives in the South. And now I just put my war bonnet up and honor them. And this is Bryant's store in Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till whistled at the white woman. And I take my war bonnet and put it up. This is where they ran me out of town, the KKK. They said they were going to kill me next time I come back. So, go Wids. I think I kept that under 15 minutes there. Ma Ziggurats, go Wids, meaning thank you.
Thank you.
I tried to keep it under 15 minutes, but I hope I didn't,
It's okay. We had a few that had to leave, but that's all right. I'd like to open it up if anybody has any questions for Mr. Jackson or Mr. Zig.
I'll answer anything.
Ask him good questions.
Bonjour, my name is Diana, and I'm from the Turtle Mountain Reservation. Have you taken any pictures from that reservation?
I know all my friends up there, the Breens. Chuck Breen even came down here to visit me. I went to school at Upward Bound with a lot of the Chippewa people from there. What's the sculptor's name? That's not Chuck's his brother, but yeah, I've been up there, Belcourt, Dunseith area. Yeah, I've taken a few. I haven't put that in my in this, but I should. I should put some images of them. I'm very, very honored that I can go up there and visit. So yes, I know your area really well. A gal broke my heart up there. So.
Oh.
Chippewa.
Is there anybody else with any questions? Okay.
So, you mentioned you were like in the boarding school, and that sounds so intense. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But yeah, what I was curious about was I saw you had some pictures in New Mexico, and I know like, you know, like the public school system can be kind of cruel to people, especially in that area, and like you know, because like the test scores aren't immaculate or whatever. But like, does the federal like influence on the tribes and like making them go to school, like does that affect like tradition and like, you know, learning like traditional things?
Not really. I think that it made it even stronger. A divide and conquer technique that the American government had. Let's take them off the reservation. Let's put them into these schools. And they still carried that on. It was called the relocation program. And that's what the Indian man in San Francisco is dealing with. I'm looking for other Indians because they would take the tribal peoples, the older people off reservation, and put them in places like Chicago, Minneapolis, Cleveland, Denver. Denver has a huge, huge population of Native Americans. Dallas, Portland, Maine, even not Portland, Maine, but Portland, Washington. Even up at the Cleveland has a large, but they were trying to break that culture down. But what it did is it made it stronger. Once you have something that's innate and you remember those times and you were brought up in that tradition, it never leaves. And these tribal peoples get together and they just talk and they say, hey, let's have a powwow, let's have a gathering. And they just get together and become stronger. So there's still places in San Jose that Native Americans own these row houses. And in Washington, they work for the big Boeing, and they have homes and huge blocks of Native Americans. So it made it stronger. A lot of things happened negatively, like you know, being, you know, getting into the Catholic thing and being raped and stuff like that. And you just got to go on and think about that and use that. So, but in a way, it helped out a lot. It was the divide and conquer technique is making culture stronger. So.
Well, we've run out of time, but I'd like to thank you again for speaking to us here and showing us your work. And let's have everybody give another round for Mr. Zig.
Thank you. I'll come by one of these years, maybe possibly this next summer. So
We'd love to have you, show you around, and yeah, it'd be wonderful. And if you want, you can take pictures. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you.